Hello, Logic Up people. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about a very, very important subject. And I hope it never happens. But it looks like we're heading towards it. And the title of today's video is, Are we heading towards World War III? Okay. And for those of you who are not familiar with what's going on all this time, you're busy with your lives. Sometimes I tend to forget that most people don't have the luxury of time like I do. And so you're busy with making a living, struggling, paying bills, of trying to get ahead, of trying to raise your kids, trying to find a mate. You really don't have time for anything else. So when a subject such as this comes up, most people either don't have much of an opinion, or they're going to try to sound like they know something, but in reality, they don't know the background in order to make form any sort of a picture of what's going on. Not your fault, you just don't have time. And the thing about the human mind is, we only take care of things that are right in front of us. We don't have time to think of possibilities down the road. Especially nowadays, with the way the economy is, people are working extremely hard for little, and that's most people. Some people make a lot of money, but for the majority of Americans today, it's all about struggling to make ends meet. With inflation the way it is, you just don't have time to ponder anything that is not right in front of you. So I understand. But this subject is going to affect everybody soon, and hopefully not soon or not ever, but it doesn't look like it. Okay. You know what's going on in the world right now? Of course, everybody knows that Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine back in February. The war's still going on. If anything, it's been stepped up even more now than before. What people don't understand is it's not isolated. Ukraine is not isolated. This affects the entire world. It affects Europe in particular. And also it is part of the big picture of the New World Order. I know that term has been around since 1990 when the Soviet Union collapsed, but now it really is changing again, where the U.S., their plan is for the U.S. not to be the #1 global leader anymore, and this is part of it. Okay, let's back up to see the background, and then now you will see that we are heading towards it, and unless we understand the root cause, as I always say, the things leading up to it, you're not going to be able to hopefully stop it, okay, from happening. See, as time goes on, the window of opportunity becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, just like anything in your life, right? Anything, health, for example. If you haven't been taking good care of your health all your life, okay, and you're now 60, 70 years old, it's going to be very difficult for you to cure any disease that might come along. If you've been smoking all your life and you contract lung cancer, the window of opportunity is this small, if not smaller. So just like everything in life, education, same thing. If you have training education at a young age, your chance of finding good paying work is a lot higher than if you don't have any. And as you go older and older and older, the window of opportunity becomes smaller and smaller and smaller to get a higher education. Why? Because you have family, you have other obligations that take you away from, having time to do that stuff. Now, is it impossible? Of course not. But I'm just saying the condition makes it smaller and smaller opportunity. So same thing here with what's going on in the world right now. The window of opportunity is getting smaller and smaller for us to get out of this. path to World War III. Okay, now let's back up. Okay, this all began. Okay, and you can do your research if you want. Again, this is logic up. It's about using your mind. Okay, using your brain, and about looking at evidence. Okay, it's not about belief. Okay, I want you to understand it's not belief. Okay, belief by definition is considering something true without any evidence. That's a belief. Okay, so whatever you believe in better have evidence. Okay, why you believe that. If not, then you need to dismiss it. It needs to be in the back of your mind, not in front of your mind, because it could be, you know, keep in the back of your mind, and if other evidence show up, then you bring it forward and say, okay, now it has some bite, some evidence. Okay, anyways, so if you want to know what caused the condition we're in today, what caused Putin to invade Ukraine, what caused Europe now to face a very harsh winter, the economy in Europe is not doing well. It's probably going to collapse because of this. The U.S. economy is going to collapse because of all this. Chinese economy is collapsing because of all this. And if you see the three big nations in the world that kind of make global policy, you know, faltering, then everybody in the world, the rest of the world, is affected. Okay, adversely. So it affects everybody, and it will culminate in a very big war, World War III, involving all these countries from Europe to Asia, and hopefully humanity will survive. Hopefully it never happened in the first place, but if it does, humanity will survive. But at the end of it, you're looking at hundreds of millions of people dead. Because how do I know that? Again, evidence. In World War I, 20 million people vanished in World War I. Okay, in World War II, 60 million people died. Okay, that's 3 times. Okay, so it's reasonable to believe that World War III will have 3 times the number of World War II. So that'll be 180 million. Okay, probably more. Think about that for a second. Okay, let's stop to even. It's mind-boggling the number of people that will vanish. I mean, 20 million is a lot already. Okay, and then World War II came along, it's 60 million. Now we're talking 180 million, 200 million, or maybe even more. That's the kind of thing we face right now as humanity, people. Okay, so what led to all this? Okay, after World War II, the U.S. emerged as the strongest nation in the world, and everybody in the world, every country in the world, shipped their gold to the United States for safekeeping at Fort Knox. Well, I'm sure it's other secret location, but Fort Knox is like an official, you know, I'm sure it's not there. It's at secret locations, and rightfully so. Okay, for safekeeping, and so that's how safe the United States was at the time. Our economy was doing very well. We were the number 1 manufacturing country in the world. Made in America meant something. Okay, we made everything basically, and we made them very well, very high quality, very, you know, tough, you know, stuff, right? It was number 1. You know, if you buy made in America product, you're doing well. Okay, you can ensure that product is high quality. It'll last you a long time. You know, that's made in America. We emerged from World War II, manufacturing weapons to manufacturing consumer products, and we did that for a long time until the 1960s, when well, back up a little bit. Okay, so then because of that, okay, the world trusted us, and at the location called Bretton Woods, they had an agreement to make the U.S. dollar the global currency. Okay, that's the currency, the standard currency that for international trade. Okay, by doing that, the United States became extremely rich because everybody has to use the dollar, and the dollar was safe. It was, you know, good as gold, and it was at that time the dollar was backed up by gold, and there's so much gold that came to America for safekeeping that the dollar was backed up by, you know, something very solid. Fast forward then, you know, 20 years later, back in the 60s, you know, 20 years after World War II, the U.S. was involved in the Vietnam War, a very costly war, not only in terms of human lives, you know, but money. So the U.S. was running out of money. They couldn't find, a way to finance the war. So what they did was very sneaky. Richard Nixon got on TV and announced that the U.S. dollar will no longer be based on gold, and it would be based on the full faith of the United States. What the freak is that? Okay, full faith. That's not tangible, right? What is a full faith in the United States? Gold is tangible. You can take it, you can touch it, you can hold it in your hand, you can taste it. Okay, it's heavy, right? It has inherent value. But what is a full faith in the United States? Well, at that time, U.S. manufacturing was still number one. Okay, and so when he said full faith in the United States, that's what it meant. It meant that the United States economy was doing well. Okay, and the output, the industrial output of the United States support the price of the dollar, the value, the worth of the dollar. So everything was, even though he announced that, it was kind of like, okay, what's going on? Is this going to collapse the dollar? But it didn't, because we had something to back it up: manufacturing might of the United States. We also had something else that backed it up, and I think it was about the same time where the U.S. made an agreement with Saudi Arabia. At that time was the world's biggest oil producer, to only accept U.S. dollar for their oil. So, for example, if another country like China want to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, they must first exchange their yuan to U.S. dollar before they can pay the Saudi for their oil, okay, in U.S. dollar. Again, that strengthened the U.S. dollar because it was popular. Everybody used it, okay? So we saw countries in the world, around the world, and even individuals buying dollar, as a store of wealth, So they bought a lot of U.S. dollar. Again, it made our country extremely, extremely rich. And as a result, the middle class was doing well, overall in the United States. Jobs were plentiful, and the whole country was rich. Okay. As time went on, the U.S., the biggest mistake of the United States that the United States made was in 1990 when the U.S. Moved most of our factories over to China. Why in 1990? It happened before. Of course, Nixon came over to China back in the 70s to make that kind of agreement to, for China to open up and have U.S. corporations move to China and take advantage of their cheaper labor. But it didn't happen in mass, like thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even probably millions of U.S. corporations moving over to China until the 1990s. Why 1990? Well, if you are alive and you remember, 1989, there was an uprising, student uprising in China called the Tiananmen Square uprising, okay? That's where the students in China started to protest. They rose up against the government, the oppressive government, and it happened at Tiananmen Square, okay? So that's why they call it the Tiananmen Square uprising, okay? You might have recalled or even see it today, old pictures of a Chinese student standing in front of a tank. He had no weapons, and he was brave enough to stand right in front of the tank and block the tank. And the media, the world's media was on that. They filmed that. They were expecting that the tank would shoot him dead right then and there. But the tank actually tried to move out of the way, and every time they moved out of the way, he moved and stood in front of it. He was that brave. He would put his life on the line and say, shoot me, okay? Shoot me if you, It didn't. The tank did not shoot him, okay? So that was a big turning point in the uprising. So after that, the Chinese government had to do something, and so they decided to open up to be more free. Okay, they say, okay, fine, we'll open up the market for international investments. We're more free now. You can talk bad about the government. We don't care. We're not going to arrest you, and this and that and the other, to make people more free so that they can start businesses and, their investments and money pump into the economy. And U.S. corporations started to move over to China in large, very large numbers. It benefited the U.S. corporations owners, of course, because when you move corporations to China, the labor at the time was extremely cheap, right? I mean, compared to the U.S. labor, okay? So they saved a lot of money from cheap labor, and they made the corporations very rich. Here's the problem. When they moved all the factories to China, the U.S. workers here don't have jobs anymore. We had towns that, that used to be manufacturing hubs, went out, they just became ghost towns. People move away from the town, and the older people that can't move away, they stay there. They became impoverished. They start smoking, bad stuff, fentanyl, marijuana, whatever they smoke, and it became a very, very bad, ghetto in those places. It collapsed the U.S. Middle class, basically. So that's when the trouble started with the United States. When they moved manufacturing over to China, China became rich because they became powerful and rich because of manufacturing. So they started to build weapons. They started to build up their military. They have modern military equipment. They built up their computer industry, the chip. They, almost on par with the U.S. manufacturing of computer chips and technology and all that stuff. So meanwhile, the U.S. became more and more, the U.S. middle class became more and more poor. But the corporations became more and more rich. Why? Because they saved money from having labor over in China, right? So they became more rich. So the guys on top, the United States, became richer and richer. Everybody else became poorer and poorer because there's no jobs. So what happens? The U.S. government tried to manipulate the market to make it look like there's opportunities and you can still make money by lowering the interest rate so that people can start buying homes, and that jack up the home prices artificially and made some people rich because, the home price goes up. And so it gives this illusion that we're rich. The middle class, some of them actually became very rich. The guys that are used to be right in the middle or maybe above the middle, they have a little bit of money, not much, but a little bit of money that they can buy properties. And then all of a sudden, they can flip homes, and, at first they buy small property, and they, with the little bit of money that they save from working, and then a few months later, especially in California, the home price went up by $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. They became very rich, so they start doing that. And, at the time, even if you're not, you don't even have a job, the banks will lend you money, to buy homes. And, of course, it resulted in the 2008 market crash. It's called the subprime mortgage. For those who don't know, subprime means, you don't qualify for a mortgage, but they give you the mortgage anyways, just because you're alive, And at first it didn't matter, because when you start flipping homes, you start making money anyways. It didn't matter. But it reached a point where all that is tapped out, and all of a sudden, you can't sell the homes anymore, and the whole house of cards came down, and the U.S. economy was affected, which affected the global economy. And so 2008, we had a great recession. They call it a great recession, but really, it was teetering on depression, for a lot of people. It devastated a lot of lives. A lot of people became homeless. Some of them haven't recovered fully, from that even today. So then what happens? 2008, the whole thing crashed. The banks ran out of money. Nobody got into trouble in the banking industry. Lehman Brothers, all those guys responsible for, subprime mortgage. They never went to jail. So it continued on. So the United States, people in charge of the United States, at that time, were trying to get the economy back back in order, right? Because people, they don't eat, they can't eat anymore. I remember those days. And so what they did was they started to offer foreign buyers to come in to buy U.S. properties to help jack up the U.S. economy. Because what happens when you have large sales of a lot of properties is that it drives the economy, right? Because when people buy homes, what else do they buy? They buy furniture, they buy appliances, they buy flooring, they buy all kinds of stuff for their house, and that has a domino effect of pulling all the economy up, because it started to create jobs for those people, right? Lumber, right? Sell lumber goes up because they have to build homes. The workers to build homes, all that. So they started to create more jobs and pull the U.S. economy up. So starting around about 2012, 13, 14 was when we saw a lot of Chinese investors start buying, because at that time, believe it or not, China is the only economy in the world that was still growing at double digits. The U.S. at that time was growing at what, 2-3% a year or something like that, and very low. Whereas China at that time was growing like 10%, 12%, and they've been doing that ever since 1990. Actually, it kept growing and growing and growing. So the people in China became very rich, and what did they do with their money? They can't buy property in China. They could, but it's not lucrative, because in China you can't own the land underneath the house you buy. Okay, the land is owned by the Chinese government. So the better investment, and they can't invest in stocks because it's very volatile in China. And so what they did was they brought their money over to the United States and buy property here in the United States, because in the United States, supposedly, when you buy a house, you own the land underneath the house too. Okay, so then that's why they did that in droves. They drove up the prices here in the United States. They made some people rich, because the builders rich, the furniture makers, the furniture sellers, and all that stuff. They became they made more money. And then you get, after that, once the economy started going, people started go back to work again. They make some money again. The government lower interest rates, and then they start buying homes. The locals, local Americans, or not local as in local, but Americans start buying homes. And some of them buy homes at other states that they don't even live in. They pull their money into what they call a REIT, REIT, and basically it's a pool of investor money, and they use that money, form a corporation, and they use that money to buy up properties. But the result is that supply and demand. They buy up more properties, meaning they jack up the price. And so it appears like the U.S. economy is doing well, even though we have no manufacturing anymore. But all during that time, the Chinese economy kept growing, became bigger and bigger and bigger, and they get to a point where they say, wait a minute, why are we using the U.S. dollar as the global currency? Why don't we switch to the yuan? Because what happened is that, was and is still, is that the U.S. government tend to use the U.S. dollar as a weapon against countries that we don't like. So we put sanctions on them, and because they have to use the dollar also in global currency, they are shut off from using the dollar, and so their economy collapsed. Okay, so then these people, they figure out, they're like, well, why are we using the dollar then? So they started to form pacts, in the international scene. The biggest one is called the BRICS, right? BRICS. That stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Okay, these are the big guys that got together and started to, China started to invest in these countries in Africa, South America, Middle East, and start building infrastructure to build a new Silk Road. They call it the Belt and Road Initiative. It's a trade route. Okay, it's a new Silk Road trade route that China has been building for the past few decades. And their idea is to take the U.S. leadership, the U.S. position as the global economic powerhouse down, because we're not behaving in ways that are beneficial to them at all. In fact, it's detrimental to their economy. So what they're trying to do was to get together, help each other, make their economy strong, and then switch, or at least offer another alternative currency as the international currency other than the U.S. dollar. That's a big no-no for the United States authorities. See, whenever, if you look at history, whenever recent history, whenever a country suggests that, the U.S. bombed them, like Libya, Iraq, okay, and now with Syria, and simply because they are working to get rid of the U.S. dollar as a global currency. So then, since China is so big, the U.S. can't just bomb China, and so what they did was they instituted a lot of economic sanctions against China, key sanctions that would take down the Chinese economy. One of which, this is very controversial. I don't care if you believe it or not, but if you look at the evidence, you see it also. The coronavirus is a U.S. created weapon to take down the Chinese economy. Why? Because it shuts down workers, right? If you're sick, you can't go to work, and so it shrink the Chinese economy. At least that's what they're hoping, and for the most part, it is shrinking. So that's their strategy, is to do that. Now, of course, they're not going to sit there and not do anything about it. So, they have to fight back. Meanwhile, over in Russia, Russia has been very concerned about their border security for the past 30 years. Since the Soviet Union collapsed, the U.S. wanted to control Russia too. And so they wanted to spread the Western way over to Russia. At one point, Vladimir Putin he did consider joining NATO, but then when he looked at the details, he didn't see that it would benefit Russia, and so he refused to join NATO. Meanwhile, NATO and the U.S. is trying to spread into closer and closer to Russia, and Russia had cried foul for the past 20, 30 years. Nobody listened to them, and so they started to build up their military because they have to protect themselves. They say, well, if the U.S. and NATO is going to spread, to my border, to our border, and they could put weapons there, nuclear weapons. It's very destabilizing. How would you like it if somebody had, like an AR-15 right next to your fence of your house? Come on, man. Why did they put it there? So that's his concern, and that's why he's been, for the past 20 years, building up the Russian military for his security. And at some point, he said, you guys need to stop doing this because, you're scaring me here, okay? One of these days, you're going to use that, basically put a gun against our head, okay? And you're going to force us to do things. And by then, we don't have a choice. So that's why he annexed Crimea a few years ago, and that's why he invaded Ukraine. And he wants to keep it a buffer, and that's why he's doing it, okay? Now you understand why he's doing it, okay? It's not because he woke up one day and his mom didn't love him and he decided to do this. It's bullshit, okay? He's been planning this for 20 years, okay, or more, all right? So that's where we are right now. It's about a war between the United States, the West, and everybody else, okay, basically. So they're trying to take down U.S. supremacy or hegemony, they call it, which is U.S. control of the global economy and the global culture and global everything, using our dollar. And now why can we do that? Because our dollar has historically been strong, being stable. So now, ever since then, they try to destabilize the American society. They have ways of, infiltrating our movies, our TikTok, social media and all that stuff to try to wake people up, to try to make people listen, And so young people, of course, they knew, so they can see things more objectively, and they started to question the U.S. policy, the way U.S. Doing things in the world. Now, of course, they still don't get the big picture, and that's why I'm doing this video so that you guys can see the big picture. But that's where we at. So then, now, of course, the U.S. is not going to lay back and just say, okay, well, if you guys don't want us to do that, then we won't. No, they're going to fight back, okay? And when I say the U.S., I'm not talking about the U.S. people, the American people. I think American people have been lied to. They don't even know what's going on in order to approve anything. So the people that are doing this, they're in charge of the United States, or at least the foreign policy. They're really above the government, really, because elected officials, they just politicians. They, mouthpiece for these people. Okay, so they just do what these people tell them to do. So then that's where we're at. Okay, so then the U.S. is now trying to fight back. We don't have that many troops, so we're doing covert operation all around the world. We blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. There's evidence that, there's motive, I mean, we're the only country with that kind of motive to blow it up. But what we're doing is we're hurting Europe because winter's coming up. They don't have the gas that they, need. And the economy is affected. And now we're trying to wage war in Europe, basically, against Russia. Meanwhile, China is has been saying that they need to reunite their Taiwan island with the mainland. U.S. of course doesn't want them to do that, and so there's conflict going on there. So the whole world right now is at a high tension, and no one seems to want to back down. The old guard, the United States and the West, they are steadfast at maintaining their hegemony, particularly in the United States. The Europeans, some people in Europe are beginning to find out that the U.S. is on the wrong side. That by siding with the U.S., they're not helping their own. Okay, they're beginning to do that, but of course they protest, and U.S. media covers it up. Right? They don't cover it all. Basically, they pretend like it's not happening, but it is. It's all because the big picture is to maintain hegemony, is to defeat Russia, Putin, to defeat China, subvert them, so that they cannot replace the US dollar. That's the whole thing here. That is the root of everything. That's why you see all this. But since nobody wants to back down, nobody wants to compromise, well, especially the US doesn't want to compromise. They just want total 100% control of the world. They're not going to share any control. There's not going to be any compromise. And so that's why I think we're heading towards World War III. Now, what's more dangerous is that each side think that they have the technology, the military might, the military technology to neutralize the other side's nuclear capability. Very dangerous, because I don't care how good your countermeasure is against nuclear ICBMs. All they have to do is launch more. There's bound to be one or two that will get through. Okay, it only takes one nuclear a weapon to get through and blow up a city, and that's it. Today the atomic bomb of today is 15 megaton or more, many times bigger than the ones we drop in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And when the U.S. dropped the bomb there, it killed 100,000 people just like that, 70,000 to 100,000 people just like that. Today's 15 megaton nuclear bomb will kill millions, not 100,000. Okay, instantly. And then with the radiation, it will kill millions more. Okay, only one, has to go through in order to do that. So this idea that we have a better technology, we can neutralize them is bullshit. Okay, these are mad people. These are people that are power hungry. Okay, and they're trying to take over the world. They're trying to maintain their hegemony. Against the American people. Did you know any of this? I bet you didn't know before I told you. Now, some of you might not even believe me, because it's so far out there, your brain just cannot process it yet. But if you have time, I know you don't have time because you're struggling with your own lives. But if you have time and you do a little bit of research, you can find that what I said is true, and that we're heading towards World War III. Now, if World War III breaks out, it doesn't matter, what you do for a living. It doesn't matter, how much money you make or how rich you are, how poor you are. We are affected by it, and many will die. Many will die, especially in Europe and Asia. Okay, many in Taiwan will die. Many in Europe will die. We're looking at, like I told you before, 180 million to 200 million people. A very big, sizable chunk. This is no joke. Okay, so it's very critical that we all understand the background and the march right now towards World War III. And we need to not take sides, but use logic, people. Use logic, because what you do when you take sides is what? You flame the fire even more. That's what you're doing, because the other side's not going to back down. Putin has said all this time. He said, look, you need to resolve this issue. We're reasonable. Okay, he just wants border security. Okay, that's all he wants. All right, but the U.S. authorities, they want global conquest. So they're not going to back down. They're not going to say, oh, okay, we'll leave you alone. No, they want to take Russia, basically. Okay, not physically take Russia, but control Russia for their economic gain, for their political gain, so that they have the power to control the world, to move pieces around the world, and people follow them and work for them. You see that? Okay, so that's why we are at where we are right now. Okay, so unless you understand that, we're never going to get rid of war. We're never going to stop World War III from happening. It will happen. I'm sorry to say. I don't like it. Nobody likes it. It's crazy. It's absolutely nutso. But it's, like most people couldn't believe that Putin invade. I knew he was going to invade. When he annexed Crimea, I started to do research, and I predicted that someday he's going to invade. And when he started to build up his troops, I knew he's going to invade. Okay, it doesn't take a rocket scientist. You got to look at what the thing is. Most people do not look at the background because you don't have time. You got work to do. You got bills to pay. You got kids to raise. And you can only see things that are right in front of you. And watch this. Once the missiles start flying, to start World War III, everybody's going to be on it. Then you start to, get interested and talk about it. But you won't know the background. You know, you won't know the background in order to understand all this. All you do is take sides. Oh, Putin is a Nazi. You know, he's like Hitler. You know, and of course the other side say, well, America is bad. You know, this and that and the other. Okay, but you got to understand it's about empire building. It's about exploitation, which has never changed throughout human history. We just got to be more efficient in killing. That's all. It's gotten bigger. That's all. But until we understand that, nothing's going to change. Nothing. And be prepared. Be prepared for hunger. Be prepared for radiation. Be prepared for explosions in big cities, probably in the United States, definitely in Europe and in Asia. Definitely. Okay? So be prepared to see a lot of deaths. A lot of deaths. So I hate to be negative, you know, but one silver lining in this is that hopefully we realize this. I made this video to help people realize. And if you don't believe me, go research. Look it up, you know, and use your mind. Think. You know, don't take sides. Don't take political sides, political party, BS, bullshit, okay? Look at the reality. Data, support the data. Where's the data that supports that? Look at as if you are from a different planet. You come down here, you don't take sides. You're not an American. You're not a Russian. You're not a Chinese. You are a humanity. You're part of humanity. You know, that's what we have to think of now. You know, we're not individual people from individual countries anymore. We are a citizen of humanity. We need to think that way in order to understand the problem, in order to fix it or prevent it from happening in the first place. Okay, well, with that, good luck, and I'll see you next time.